Ladies and gentlemen, your last session of the day. Before the reception, on behalf of TAGG, I want to welcome each of you to this session on just essentially on science, looking at the different local science and developments. I see a lot of you I know personally. I'm excited about the three people that are going to be speaking, but a little housekeeping. One is I want to, as you set through these sessions, you see all of the sponsors that have made this such a special event. And again, thanks to each of them. If you're part of one of those companies, a personal expression of my appreciation. I've been here through the entire life of this conference and never dreamed we'd have over 500 people here. So thank you all very much. And if you don't know the sponsors and you're not a sponsor, please seek people out and tell them how much you appreciate it. I am General Manager of Clearwater, the Groundwater Conservation District for Bell County. And if you're in front of your program, our board actually sponsors the program each year. We don't sponsor an app. We're not doing some of the other technology things, but we've been the sponsor of the program since the inception. And I appreciate my board for being so supportive of that. Our first speaker actually does work in our district. Worked with Vince for some time. If you want to know more about Vince Claus, there's a nice little biography in the back. But if you want to know the skinny, he's married, has a child, got 2 kids yet? 2 kids, good gosh. Things happened during COVID for him. Really 3 significant things. He forgot how to get a haircut, so he had a ponytail that he didn't know we could tell he had until he kept turning on those screens and had a monster ponytail, and I loved it, obviously because I'm jealous. And he had a monster beard, but yet the joy in it all was the fact that he worked with our district through some tough times, 3D modeling, doing things that have changed the life of our GCD with his intellect and his commitment, and he's working for a great company, Leonard Rice, or LRE, Water for Texas. Vince, have it. And here's...
Well, good afternoon, and Dirk, thank you for the very kind and somewhat colorful introduction there. The ponytail was something I thought I was getting away with for probably 6 months there, and it was a meeting with Dirk where he commented on nice ponytail, and then I realized my one flaw there was every time I looked at my second screen, at the back of my head you could see that thing. So unfortunately that was a one-time and done type of experiment there, but as Dirk said, that was my big COVID experiment there with trying to grow long hair. Anyways, all besides the point. Please bear with me today. I will talk fast. That's because I'm condensing a year's worth of research and science and an hour-long presentation into about 25 minutes here. What we will be discussing today is very geology intensive, but what we're going to try to do here is hit on some very key points as it specifically relates to the science that we have done, how that then relates to the Trinity Aquifer in an area of Central Texas. So as I refer to Central Texas, I'll be really referring to that greater Austin area that includes Travis, Williamson, Bell and Burnett County. And what we'll do here throughout this is we'll try to go high level and then narrow our focus, zoom in. So we'll go from about 50,000 feet down to 10,000 feet, and then we'll talk about why all this matters at the end of the day. So as I said, I'm going to speak fast. We're just going to go through our generic outline slide here very quickly. We'll be talking about some project background, how this project came to life. We'll touch on the study area, then move forward as we discuss the geologic setting, touch base on some of the methodology and results, and then finally round this out by touching on some of those key findings and then ultimately those recommendations that have come from those findings. So what's happened here? We're talking about an area that's a high growth area within Texas. Once again, I'll use Central Texas as that vague, generic geographic area, but we're really talking about a 4-county area that is fortunate and blessed to have 4 very important and insightful GCDs in terms of the type of science and research that they've supported over the years. What we have on this screen is just 6 different publications, pieces of research that have been done over about the last decade and a half here. Very important findings have been involved in each one of these. The first one we have here is a study by Tom Partridge that was performed on behalf of the Central Texas GCD. This study, one of those very important key findings from this research was an area where we weren't necessarily seeing some of the Trinity Formation as it had been previously described. We were seeing a lack of Trinity sands in the western portion of Burnett County. Kind of opened some eyes, caused some people to ask, why is that occurring? And then I'm just going to quickly move forward here. We had Bell County that developed a hydrostratigraphic model. That was something that Alan Standen did back in 2014. Then we had the Hydrogeologic Atlas of Southwest Travis County. This is something that Barton Springs, Edwards Aquifer Conservation District supported to help support the creation of Southwest Travis County GCD there early on. We have some other research that was performed here for Barton Springs where we were taking a look at some faults, trying to better understand how those faults were impacting flow within the Trinity Aquifer, making some observations about how those faults actually, there was a direct correlation to water levels, aquifer properties. So what we're hitting on here is local science ultimately at the end of the day. And really important, impactful local science that was helping us better understand how water flows and moves through the Trinity Aquifer. But what we were doing through all of this is we were creating a void in northern Travis County, within Williamson County, where this same science wasn't being done and performed because there has been historically a lack of a GCD in that area. But what Alan Standen did back in 2020, he had this brilliant idea of, hey, let's connect all these different stakeholders and let's see if there's an opportunity here to take all these different ideas, these different observations, findings that we've been making in southern Travis County. So when I say we, what Barton Springs has really been doing down there, these findings that we've had up in Bell County, the really cool and exciting work that Burnett County is sponsoring as it relates to some work that they had there with the county and Interra. Is there a way to bridge a gap here and take all this data, the science, bring it together, harmonize these discrete data sets into one, and then try to make some new, unique observations as it relates to how this aquifer really behaves in this very high growth area where we're all faced with water supply shortages and issues today. So just to touch on those project sponsors and some of our team members here, I had mentioned that there's several GCDs that exist within this area. Those three GCDs that were key sponsors of this work here include Southwest Travis County GCD, and that was made possible through some additional funding that they were provided through Travis County. In addition to that, Travis County and Southwest Travis County, they've drilled a monitor well and they've performed other studies here that have allowed us to advance our understanding of these aquifer systems. And then Clearwater Underground Water Conservation District and Central Texas GCD were also project sponsors here. In terms of the team, that includes individuals from LRE Water, including myself, and then also we have Brian Hunt out of the Bureau of Economic Geology. He's been able to do some really cool science as it relates to work in Travis County that's allowed us to advance our understanding of the aquifer system here, and then was instrumental in advancing some discussions as it relates to some changes that we then see. And Michelle Sutherland with Envision Water, and then Interra through work that they've been doing with Central Texas GCD that's really allowed us to better understand what's happening within the Trinity Aquifer out there in Burnett County. So ultimately, at the end of the day, what we're seeing here is lots of collaboration. I think it took about 6 months to put this project together. Various meetings were held with key stakeholders in the area. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we saw collaboration between GCDs to make this possible. We saw collaboration between consultants. And so it was bringing all of these different people together is ultimately what has led to the success of this work. So just a quick look at the study area here. I'm going to actually draw everyone's attention to the right side of the screen here. Our study area does overlap with a very small portion of the overall Trinity Aquifer. I believe the Trinity Aquifer covers 61 counties or portions of 61 counties in Texas. So we're looking at a relatively small, limited area within the Trinity Aquifer. But because of that, we're really able to narrow our focus and really dive in here as it specifically relates to this study area. What I have on the left side of the screen, this is that area with limited research historically. It's that northern Travis County area, it's the Williamson County area, and then what you can see from the study area here, we're really just focusing in on that area west of I-35, all the way out into Burnett County, where the Trinity Aquifer eventually ends as it outcrops on top of those much older Paleozoic and Precambrian rocks that exist there because of the Llano uplift. So with this study area here, we actually have a lot of really unique things that are occurring within the geologic setting. When I'm referring to the geologic or regional setting here, what I'm really referring to is that ancient landscape that once existed prior to the deposition of the Trinity Aquifer. So this is a landscape that was once coined as the Wichita Paleoplain. So we have Hill in 1901 here, where he first observed that we had a difference in how there was a erosional unconformity between that ancient landscape and then the overlying Trinity Aquifer, those Cretaceous rocks that were then eventually deposited on top of that landscape. But what we have on the right side of the screen there is our study area, and what we've done is we've overlaid it with all these different features that relate to this pre-Cretaceous landscape. So this ancient landscape that existed before the Trinity Aquifer was ever deposited there. And so we have the Llano uplift, which is our typical kind of a granite uplift area, also consistent with where we have the Ellenberger and Hickory rocks that outcrop there at land surface. We have the Wichita thrust front, which is an ancient continental collision, kind of where that nexus point took place, where we had rocks from one continent being pushed on top of another. We have the San Marcos Arch, which is a promontory feature within the region, so a regional high that exists within that ancient landscape. We also have something called the Belton High. Now, I've performed numerous literature reviews as it relates to this study. The Belton High is something that I've only found 2 historic references to within the literature, and I think both of those have come out of Baylor Geological Society publications. Now, the next one here, the Round Rock Syncline, there's only one reference to this, and it's within an old 1962 dissertation out of the University of Texas. This is a topographic low within that ancient landscape. And then we work our way to the very northwest of our study area, and we see the San Marcos Arch, which is another promontory feature within the region. So we have this ancient landscape. We have differential relief structures within that landscape, which then controlled or potentially controlled how those deposits were then laid upon that ancient landscape. And then, of course, we have that post-Cretaceous Balcones Fault Zone, which created a complete different system. It led to the prolific nature of the Edwards Aquifer in terms of being a promoter of karstification within that system. But all of these features are somewhat interrelated. There's a story to be told about each one individually, but just wanted to outline how we're really looking at a very unique system here when we're able to zoom in and look at this relatively smaller area. And so just to quickly touch on the surface geology, I keep saying Cretaceous, pre-Cretaceous. Our Cretaceous rocks, that's all of our limestone rocks that we see across central Texas. So the Edwards is part of that Cretaceous system. The Trinity Aquifer is part of the Cretaceous system. So as geologists, we like to categorize things by different time scales. The Cretaceous is one of those that we commonly use. But what we have here on the screen in terms of that surface geology is Edwards rocks out there to the east. And as we work our way west, we start seeing those Trinity rocks that outcrop. And in the far western edge of the study area, that's where we get those older Paleozoic and Precambrian rocks that are occurring. So everything's dipping to the east there as we get towards I-35. We have a thickening wedge of sediment and materials as we make that transition. Just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of the system that we were specifically referring to in this discussion. However, this is the last time we'll talk about surface geology. Every other discussion that we'll have moving forward is really related to those aquifers and what's happening below ground. Please bear with me on this slide here. We have our stratigraphic column forest study area to the left. To the right there, this is a type section or a lithology section that I've pulled out of the Southwest Travis County Geologic Atlas of Texas. And this is specifically showing us how the Trinity Aquifer changes between those lower, middle, and upper units. We have that basal section, which is consistent with the Austin or the Sycamore. It's subdivided from the Middle Trinity by the Hammett Shale. That's a confining unit in there. And so within the Middle Trinity, we have the Cow Creek and Hensel sandstones, and then we start working our way up into that Glen Rose section. So what we've done to this complex strat column that you see over to the left side of the screen here is we've somewhat simplified that into an 8-layer system here with the undifferentiated Cretaceous, Glen Rose, Hensel, Cow Creek, Hammett, Pearsall, Sligo, Austin, and then undifferentiated Paleozoics. And hopefully this one doesn't get me into trouble here. The second bullet point here is something that I know is a touchy subject for some in the room here, but there's two points that I wanted to touch on here quickly, two that are very relevant to the overall discussion. The first is the use of the terminology Travis Peak. It's something that some of y'all may have seen in the literature. What it was it was something that was once used to describe the water-bearing beds of the Trinity Aquifer. This was first introduced in 1901. But what happened with time as geologic observations were made specifically as it relates to the aquifer, we actually had some recommendations that the Travis Peak be retired due to numerous intraformational discontinuities or disconformities that exist within that formation. And we started to subdivide the Trinity Aquifer into that lower, middle, and upper section. And then fast forward a little bit in time there, in 1966, we had Fisher and Rhoda that actually decided to propose that we actually have regional differences within the Trinity Aquifer. We have this northern section of the Trinity Aquifer that has less limestones, is less calcareous, more siliceous in terms of having more quartz within it. And then we have the southern section that is more typical of the calcareous limestones that we do see here within central Texas. And so this is something we'll come back to here in a little bit as it specifically relates to the lower Trinity Aquifer. But this next point here, Hensel with one L, Hensel versus two L's. I know I've gotten myself into trouble with Dirk once because of this exact topic, but that's because there is a bit of a disagreement in terms of how this should be spelled. Back in 1901, we had the Hensel sands first introduced by Hill with two L's there. But if you rewind a little bit, in 1890, that same author, R.T. Hill, was referring to Mr. Hensel's house with one L. So there's many within the geologic community that believe that 1901 landmark publication that we all reference actually included a misspelling. And the reason we believe that is because as geologists, when we name a formation, when we identify a type section, we're supposed to correlate that to a nearby type locality. And we actually had Mr. Hensel, who lived and was the postmaster and founder of Travis Peak, Texas, who lived where this type locality section was first introduced. So there's enough circumstantial evidence to where many within the geology community believe it really should be 1L. But what's happened here is it was in 1971, there was a Bureau of Economic Geology map that was created, and then adopted by the USGS, which included the 2L spelling. So the USGS has adopted the 2L spelling, and then more recently we had a Texas Water Development Board study where they acknowledged that there were some disagreements in the spelling of the Hensel, but because of that USGS adoption, because of prior literature that had been created from the Texas Water Development Board and others in the groundwater community, they erred on the side of the 2L spelling. However, for this publication, or for this study, I will use the 1L spelling, and that is because the majority of the literature that is cited that supports this study also use the 1L spelling. So please don't throw a tomato at me for that, but that was the decision that was made. And over here on the right side of the screen, this is actually where the Hensel Christian Camp now exists. This is where Mr. Hensel once had a property along the Cow Creek River in Travis Peak, Texas. So just one of those data points that we like to use to support that 1L spelling. So in terms of data and methods, I talked about how we had all these different discrete data sets, discrete study areas that were being performed across the region. What we're actually looking at on this screen right now, this image, all those different color markers correspond to a different study that was performed over the last 20 years or so. What we do see is there is a data gap area that does exist there in northern Travis County, southern Williamson County. And what we've done here is we've performed a data mining exercise where we pulled all that data together, and then a data harmonization exercise to where we're able to merge all those different data sets into one there. And so ultimately we ended up with a really good starting point here, which it was a data set that included over 1,100 well control points across the study area. What we also did in addition to that is we mined additional geophysical log data from the Texas Water Development Board, their BRAX database. We also went to the Bureau of Economic Geology. We found additional geophysical log from their geophysical log facility. Went to the TCEQ, mined their plotted water well reports for additional geophysical log data. In addition to geophysical logs, we looked at lithology descriptions in the top right corner of the screen. That's an example from a TDLR well report where we're able to use those driller lithology descriptions and then make correlations to those Trinity Aquifer subunits. And then in the bottom right, that's actually an old oil and gas exploratory strip log that we were able to find that supports data within this study area. That was over at the Bureau of Economic Geology as well, from their oil and gas cable tool and scout ticket log library. Two additional data points that were actually instrumental to advancing our understanding of this study area include a monitor well that was drilled by Southwest Travis County GCD. This location was picked by Lane Cockrell, the general manager, because it was an area where we knew that we didn't have a lot of good well control in terms of water levels. But what Lane didn't realize is this literally provided the Rosetta Stone for everything that we did after the fact. This one location opened our eyes into some changes that we see there as it relates specifically to the Cow Creek and the Hensel sandstone. So it was a perfect opportunity for us to really learn a lot more about how this system's really working. And then this was done by GeoProjects International, and then it was Ben Grenew and Vicki Kennedy, Ben Grenew out of the Bureau of Economic Geology and Vicki Kennedy from Travis County that were able to help pull that core for us. That was somewhat tangential to this work. That was going to happen whether or not this study was done, but we were able to then analyze that core as part of this study, provide additional insights into what's really happening with the geology at this one location. And then over on the right side of the screen, we had an opportunity to analyze some lower Trinity drill cuttings from a irrigation well in northern Williamson County, kind of in the Georgetown, Florence area, for any of those that are familiar with that general area. And this was really key and instrumental in helping us better understand some correlations and connections within the aquifer system as well. So ultimately, what does all that look like? This is the before, this is the after on the left side of the screen, and that's where we started. And the right side of the screen, all those orange dots are new data points that we were able to supplement and add to this study. So we went from about 1,100 control points to just over 1,700 well control points, and we're really able to infill data in an area that really didn't have a lot of data to begin with when we started all this, which is that northern Travis, southern Williamson County area. So from that data, we were able to bring all of our geophysical logs into Petra. We were able to correlate those geophysical logs together against one another. From this data, we were able to generate cross-sections that work our way across the study area from south to north, east to west, to better understand those facies changes, those changes in geology, lithology that are occurring across the study area. And this one log in particular, we've kind of squished everything together so it's not necessarily to horizontal scale. So it may look like that we're getting some pretty dramatic breaks in there, but what we have at the far right-hand side of the screen is actually where we have some of those major faults occurring with that red break, that vertical break that we see there in place. So it provides us with a different way to look at, to analyze the data, and it also provides those within the community an additional resource to better understand how these formations are interacting with one another across the entire study area. So I mentioned we had some rock core that we were able to evaluate. And so this was once again related to that southwestern Travis County GCD monitor well. This core was analyzed by Brian Hunt, where these first couple pictures we'll look at here include some of that analysis, some of those correlations. On the left-hand side of the screen, what we have here is where we have the contact between the Hensel Formation and then the Cow Creek Formation below. And then on the right side of the screen, we have a contact between that Cow Creek and that underlying hammock. So what this was able to do for us is help us better understand the geology in an area where we really didn't have a lot of data by actually giving us some rock core that provided us concrete evidence or calcareous evidence in this example here of what that geology really looks like and how that correlates to a geophysical log. But one of those key findings from all of this is that we're actually missing a very large piece of the Cow Creek Aquifer here. In Travis County, the Cow Creek is considered a major source of water. In Bell County, it's an afterthought. And what this helped us better understand is we're actually starting to miss those upper sections of the Cow Creek aquifer as soon as northern Travis County. And what Brian was able to do, and this is the 2024 reference here, is he was able to correlate that to changes that we see in that San Marcos arch structure. So I talked about early on how this ancient landscape is important. Well, now we're starting to touch on why that's important, where we're able to start better understanding this change in Cow Creek, Hensel contact, as we move northward through this study area because of this one well location, this one data point. But then what we were able to do is then take that information, correlate it with this well data point that we had in northern Williamson County, and make the exact same observation that we're missing that upper and middle Cow Creek section. We still have that lower Cow Creek section, which really doesn't have a lot of water. But what's happening is we're getting a facies change where we're getting more sands within the Hensel and less of those limestones in the Cow Creek that's occurring as we move northward through the study area. So just a couple of other key observations here is there's a green shell that we have several data points that occurs at the top of the Hensel contact. So what that's done for us through some of these correlations, there's some rock core down in the Hamilton Pool area. We have this well in northern Travis County. We have this well in northern Williamson County. We have well control points in Bell County that all show us this green glauconitic shell, sandy shell that occurs at the top of the Hensel. So what this study here has done is helped us better identify a diagnostic marker bed that as drillers, as hydrogeologists, we're able to use to better position ourselves as those drill cuttings are coming out of the ground. Now, there's probably more to that story that needs to be investigated. And the other thing that we see here is the Hostin's composed of more of a gray siltstone, sandstone, calcareous mix with some dolomitic gravels, which we'll circle back around to this here in a second. From this data, we were also able to develop a 3D hydrostratigraphic model that helps us better understand the relationship of those formations with faults within the area. From that data, we were also able to develop this stratigraphic section here, which helps us really understand those facies changes that we see as we move from southern Travis County into northern Bell County. A couple key things to take note of here will be touched on in the next couple slides, but the last thing I want to point out while we're here is just where that cross section is. This is western Williamson, Travis County, right there along the county line with Burnett County to the west there. But the first thing I wanted to draw attention to is as we're moving from southern Travis County to Bell County, right before we get into Williamson County, and this is where we start seeing that transition occur where we're losing those upper sections of the Cow Creek and we start getting more of those sandier sections within the Hensel, then replacing that area. We're also going from a more calcareous Hensel section in the upper section there in southern Travis County to a more sandy section as we get into Bell County. We'll take a look at the undifferentiated Paleozoics. And one thing I want to draw attention to is we flatten this along the top of the hammock to help us better understand those facies changes by limiting and reducing that structural interference that we would normally see. But the one big takeaway here is how this undifferentiated Paleozoic landscape is an irregular landscape that is then having a direct control and impact on deposition of the Hostin formation above it. So we're seeing changes in overall formation thickness as it specifically relates to the way that ancient landscape pre-existed before the deposition of these units ever took place. Something else to take note of is we believe that there's a depositional divide occurring within the Hostin Formation now. We have a lot of sediment within the Hostin Formation in Travis County and even in southern Williamson County that is described as being multicolored sandstones. This picture to the left speaks to that. I know colors may be a little off here, but we have some purples, some reds, some blues in that sandstone matrix. But as you can see from the image to the right, there's no more multicolored sandstone. It's pure gray. It's more salacious. So we're dealing with a lot more quartz grain materials. So we're getting some sort of unique change within the depositional patterns. And it just so happens to coincide to where we also have this ridge line forming in the surface, which may also coincide to where that Belton High is actually existing as well. And so I mentioned that this is flattened along the hammock. This is what that would have looked like. And from this cross section here, you could see the San Marcos Arch. If you pay attention to what's on the bottom, we have San Marcos Arch to the left, Round Rock Syncline there in the middle, and then Belton High to the right there forming within this cross section. And Dirk's told me I'm out of time, so I'm going to move very quickly as I wrap this up here. What we've done from these different observations, from these different data sets, is we've developed this paleogeologic model for the Middle and Trinity Aquifer. What you can see is there's a lot going on this image on the right side of the screen. What we've done here is we've modified the Trinity carbonate facies that was first observed by Bill Klempt back in 1975. We extended a Hensel-clastic and marine facies across the entire study area that was first observed in the 2020 publication there by Barton Springs. And then extended the Sligo extent, identified that upper and nearshore Cow Creek approximate extent, identified a Pearsall approximate extent, and then that lithostratigraphic divide there in the Hostin. When you overlay all that with that ancient structure, there's a lot of similarities into what that ancient Paleozoic landscape looks like and where it exists, and then how these changes in depositional patterns actually have taken place with time. Conclusions and recommendations: there's a strong correlation between those ancient landscapes, or between that ancient landscape and our Trinity Aquifer system. That Twin Mountains Travis Peak divide, we think that that may be starting to show up there in that Williamson County area. The San Marcos Arch corresponds to changes in the Middle Trinity Aquifer. Sligo and clastic Hensel facies are relatively similar to where we have some faults and some structural changes in the area. Disclaimer here, additional research is still needed to confirm these general observations. These are correlations that we're able to infer from these data sets. Still needs to be more science to better understand exactly how these findings can lead to an overall better understanding of the aquifer system. Finally here, these hydrogeologically distinct areas may provide for an early framework for, say, management zones or management strategies down the road. If we're able to better subdivide this aquifer system, there's a way that we can then better manage those groundwater resources, at least potentially. And then with this new data, I believe that there should be considerations given to advance and update the regional models with this new discernment of the Trinity Aquifer to better account for that lateral and vertical, those differences that we see across the system. And then once again, a little disclaimer, although this may not be an appropriate strategy for those regional models, it's definitely something that should be considered for any local models that are to be developed in the near future. And bottom image here just shows how we correspond to the Northern Trinity GAM to the north, and that hill country, our Southern Trinity GAM to the south. And that's it. And I think Dirk's probably going to tell me I'm out of time for questions. So I'll be around all day if anyone does have any.